Guardians. In Act 2 of Revenant, we got a pretty major change to roaming supers, increasing their regeneration rate by 3 times and letting them deal 30 to 55% more damage to champions. This effectively changes the way you'll use your roaming super. In the past, it's been used as a get out of jail free card. With the increased regeneration, we now have builds that can focus on using your super as a primary part of your build, giving you a ton of ad clearing potential and in turn a ton of survivability. Let's get right on into it. First up, we have a build that is going absolutely bananas. The Destiny community found that for some reason, Sentinel Shield is doing 172% more damage to bosses. I'm not sure if this was actually intended by Bungie or if they plan on fixing it in a future patch, but until then, this build is absolutely busted. I mean, the super is now capable of beating out a Star Eater artifact boosted Glacial Quake. So we want to use this super on most bosses, but the best part is we bring a ton of things to get our super back at a rapid rate. That way we can use our super more often. One of the main components is the exotic gauntlets, Doom Fang Pauldon. This makes it so that we can get a powered melee kill, and in turn we get 20% of our super back. Then while we're in our super, we can use our shield throw to gain back 10% energy per hit, allowing us to stay in our super for longer. By itself, this is already really strong, but we then bring Echo of Reprisal so that while we're surrounded, we gain even more super energy, paired with Ashes to Assets, allowing our grenades to generate even more super energy. To top it all off, Doom Fang will also give you up to ×4 Void Weapon Surge for a 25% weapon damage boost, just by getting powered melee kills or rapid kills from any void damage. So we then bring Echo of Instability for volatile rounds, and that way we can deal a ton of damage with our void weapons. This build is super powerful, but it also has a good amount of survivability. The aspect Controlled Demolition causes more void explosions, but it also makes it so that those explosions will heal you and your team. That paired with Bastion to gain a void overshield on barricade usage and Echo of Starvation so that we gain Devour when we pick up an orb leads itself to a ton of survivability. And what's the flow for this build? Well, if you don't have your super charged, then you want to remember to use your powered melee whenever you get it back. That way you can gain that burst of super energy. In easy content, I like Shield Throw, but in hard content, Shield Bash is the better option, offering you more overall damage. Then get a grenade kill to proc those volatile rounds, and continue killing with your void weapons until you get that super back. Feel free to pop your super whenever you want, since as long as there are enemies to kill, you can stay in your super for as long as you want. If you have your super in a boss phase, then feel free to pop it for a good amount of boss damage. And when it comes to improving the build, for stats, I'm shooting for 100 in resilience. Then I go for about 80 to 90 in discipline and strength, but make sure that you have at least 50 in intellect, since at 50, it will maximize the amount of gains that you get from dealing damage. When it comes to weapons, I really like running a void primary and a void heavy weapon to make the most out of our void weapon surge. Choir of One is a super powerful special weapon that can be pretty much used as a primary weapon, though if you don't want to worry as much about ammo, Graviton Lance is a great alternative. And Edge Transit is one of the best DPS weapons and works perfectly with this build. For that artifact, we can bring Concussive Reload so that our grenade launchers will weaken bosses and champions, and then you can bring Curative Orbs so that you create more orbs, and when boosted, orbs will give you even more health. If you have a teammate that can proc a stasis debuff, then Conductive Cosmic Crystal can give you another 5% damage for all of your abilities. From boss damage to super regeneration to staying in our super for a long time, this build is a bit ludicrous. It's a ton of fun and honestly very strong. And if you're enjoying the video, remember to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this in the future. And the second build on the list has been around for a while, but it's making a major comeback. Solar Titan has been one of the safest options, giving you a decent amount of damage, but a ton of restoration. Since this new update increases our champion damage and super regeneration, I decided to take Synthoceps to boost our overall super damage and melee damage while you're surrounded. To make the most of this, I landed back on Solar instead of Prismatic. That way we can use Roaring Flames to increase our Solar ability damage even further. While at 3 stacks, you gain 70 73% increased ability damage. And while your Synthoceps is active, you gain a total of 252% more damage for your melee and 100% more damage for your super. The other big part of this is Soul Invictus. In a normal rotation, this means solar ability kills and scorched enemy kills will create a sunspot that will damage enemies. But while you're passing through a sunspot, you gain restoration and increased grenade and melee regeneration. But one of the most important parts about Soul Invictus is the way it interacts with supers. When you pop your super on the ground, a sunspot will appear at your feet, and while in a sunspot, your super drains 40% slower. This helps to amp up the overall damage potential from your super. I love the Burning Maul super since I can hot swap to Pyrogale for some quick boss DPS. But if you want a super that can be used anywhere on anything, then Hammer of Soul is the way to go. As for the flow for the build, you want to get a solar ability kill to spawn one of those sunspots, then walk through it to gain restoration. Keep killing with your solar weapons or just run around hammering everything. You'll get back your super at a rapid rate, so feel free to pop it whenever there are a ton of enemies or for some extra boss damage. And when it comes to improving the build, for stats I shoot for 100 in resilience. Then I aim for a mix of high discipline and intellect, mainly because strength, recovery, and mobility are pretty much irrelevant for this build. As for weapons, the most important thing is to bring a solar primary and heavy weapon to extend your restoration and radiant. Abyss Defiant is a fun weapon since it gets the Curse Thrall intrinsic that allows it to cause explosions after you get a hammer kill. Otherwise, any solar weapon with incandescent is the way to go, since if you lose your hammer, the scorched kills will help get back your melee ability at a rapid rate. Two of my favorite heavy weapons are the Parasite for a ton of burst damage and boss melting, or Dragon's Breath for some really good ammo economy and solar synergy. As for the artifact, if you're bringing a grenade launcher, then Concussive Reload will allow you to weaken enemies. Then you can bring the Thick of It, so that rapid kills while surrounded will give you armor charge. And then top it all off with Curative Orbs, so that breaking a combatant shield for the first time will create an orb. This build is a really strong solo build, but now it's even stronger for any activity, since we can spam our super more often to clear out a ton of enemies. And for the last build, we have an Arc Titan build that uses Fists of Havoc to mass delete enemies. We take the exotic helmet, Insurmountable Skullfort. This now makes it so that when we get a powered melee kill, our melee charge is refunded, and we start health regeneration. With the ability to fully recharge your melee, in easy content, I highly recommend running Ballistic Slam. Not only is it a ton of fun to use, but each enemy you hit gives back an extra 3% super energy, leading to more Fists of Havoc. Now, I only recommend this for easy content, since it can be very dangerous to use and can make it hard to hit flying targets. So in hard content, we bring Seismic Strike, since it will also blind enemies, and with this season, they'll take even more arc damage because of that. The whole idea is to run around and shoulder bash everything, and that's because we bring 2 hands-on mods and 3 heavy-handed mods to generate even more super energy and orbs. If you happen to hit a bigger target or don't get a kill, then keep cycling through your grenades to create ionic traces and feed back that melee energy. We bring the aspect Touch of Thunder to make our pulse grenades deal more damage over time and to create ionic traces. We then pair that with Spark of Magnitude to have them last even longer, Spark of Shock to have them jolt targets, and Spark of Ion so that killing a jolted target will create an ionic trace. And while you're in that super, the Heavy Slam is great for clearing out adds, but the Light Attack is actually dealing more damage to single targets. So when you have a boss, I personally like to do 2 light attacks in between my heavy slams. And what's the flow for this build? Well, it's incredibly simple. Shoulder bash everything, with Knockout giving you a burst of health, and your exotic refunding your melee and starting health regen. This is our main way to survive. In the meantime, you can use your weapons to take out hard to reach enemies, and when it comes time for boss DPS, I like to shoot off a full burst of my heavy weapon and then use my super. And when it comes to improving the build, for stats I shoot for 100 in resilience and discipline. Then I go for as much intellect as possible. You do have some free reign when it comes to weapons, but this season we can bring arc weapons for that extra 15% damage. So I like to bring a good arc primary like Trinity Ghoul for ad clear, Risk Runner for more arc resistance, or even just a weapon that has Volt Shot or jolting feedback to create even more ionic traces. For the heavy weapon, I mainly like to bring this season's Bittersweet, since it can roll with Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch to deal some good burst damage. Otherwise, Grand Overture can be really good against the right boss, or Anarchy can be good to do some damage over time while you go to town with your super. And for that artifact, we do have a couple perks that we want to bring. First, authorized melee mods will make all of your melee mods only cost 1 energy slot. Trace Evidence can help you create more ionic traces by getting precision hits against arc debuffed enemies. And Arc Compounding will let you deal 15% more arc damage against nearly everything since your shoulder charge and your super will both blind enemies. If you're bringing a grenade launcher, then concussive reload is great for adding in that weakening effect. And finally, I love to bring curative orbs to create more orbs, but then I also boost it so that elemental pickups and orbs will give us a boost of health. This build is honestly a ton of fun to use. While it can be a bit tricky to stay alive at times, it does give you a ton of damage potential. And there you have it, Guardians. We've covered 3 Titan builds that use roaming supers and allow you to constantly use your super. Keep an eye out for next week's video where I'll be going over 300 builds that can do the exact same thing. But if you want to see 4 meta Titan builds that are geared for endgame activities, go check out this video here. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed seeing a new perspective, feel free to like the video and comment down below on what builds you've been enjoying most for Titans. Keep an eye out for future videos as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of Destiny 2. Until then, may the threads of fate be ever in your favor. This is Lucky Mech, signing off. See you on the next adventure, Guardians.